Now, coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, an oddly similar figure started to emerge at around that time, or at least in the 1800s, 3,000 miles away. Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to the personification of Christmas. Now, if you are a parent and you have kids in the room right now, just a quick warning, this video is not for kids, okay? So you've been warned, and that's because I will be talking about alcohol in this video. That's the only reason. But if you do have kids, usher them out the room. They should be in bed anyway, because You Know Who is coming very soon. And speaking of You Know Who, that's exactly who we're going to talk about today. But when we talk about You Know who are we talking about? That's a good question, because, of course, in the United States, you have Santa Claus. And in Britain, England and Britain, just all of it, you have Father Christmas and Santa Claus. They're used interchangeably as terms. That wasn't always the case. And today I just want to talk a little bit about how they merged over time. And it wasn't just over, the odd drink and mince pie. Firstly, it's very important to say the one I know, Father Christmas, actually predates Santa Claus by some few hundred years, or at least the idea of him does. So the personification of Christmas is much older than Santa Claus. It's much older than our ideas of what Father Christmas and Santa Claus are. Actually goes back to the 15th century. We had a carol that emerged at around that time, and it talked about this father figure, this Christmas figure. I think he was known as Sir Christmas in this particular carol, observing the birth of Jesus Christ and imploring everybody to drink with merriment at this birth. So very early on, he was this sort of symbol, this Christmas symbol of jollity and merriment and alcohol. I told you there'd be alcohol involved. None actually at my table, which is the saddest thing. That's not important right now. What is important is that in England, these traditions of the personification of Christmas have existed for a good 500, 600 years. But they went by different names. Like I said there, he was initially known as Sir Christmas, but he also went by Christmas Lord, I think it was, Prince Christmas, and my favourite, Captain Christmas. I think that needs to be brought back. That would be... What a great name for a superhero that only emerges at Christmas. Although when you think about it, Santa and Father Christmas sort of are a superhero. They can get around the entire world in a night using just reindeer and somehow carry all these presents with them. I also think they're Time Lords to be able to do that, because the sleigh must be bigger on the inside. The idea here behind the personification of Christmas carried on. I mean, it wasn't just something that happened and then just went away. No, this idea of this embodiment of Christmas jollity and merriment was something that was held dear to people, I think, just regular people in England for hundreds of years. And in fact, it was further propagated or popularized through the theatre. And no greater example of this, in fact, than in Ben Jonson's play. Ben Jonson being sort of a post-Shakespeare playwright of around that same time, the Jacobean period, just after the death of Elizabeth I. He wrote a play called Christmas, His Mask, spelt the French way. And in that, this sort of figure was presented as a kind of old but miserly kind of guy. He had a long, thin beard and a sort of pointy hat. And he was referred to in this, in fact, as Captain Christmas. Absolutely beautiful. But this is another example, though, in the written word from those days of this being the case. And he would emerge in theatre and in theatrical productions from then until the end of time. I mean, it's still happening now. You'll see him in sort of pantomimes for my American audience, are these sort of like really over-the-top theatrical productions that we put on in Christmas in England. Sometimes he will show up in those to this very day. So this idea was kept alive through the arts and through the sort of word of mouth at Christmas that this guy existed. And he was there, a long time. But his very existence was threatened by the emergence of the Puritan government. The Puritans came to power, of course, and those of you that know your history will know that the Puritans actually made a move, in a successful move there for about 15 years, starting in and around 1644, to ban Christmas and all of the sort of old traditions that went with Christmas. And of course, along with that came the idea, the personification of Christmas. So even he was banned for a while, but This idea backfired on the Puritans for the very good reason that there was a band of royalists that, of course, stayed around, and they longed for the good old days before the dark times, right? And they sought to bring back this Captain Christmas in all his glory, because he symbolized everything that was good about the past before the Puritans. And so the idea still remained in people's brains, even though Christmas was being hammered out of people's brains through the law. Legally, there was a ban on Christmas. In other words, come hell or high water, his name, whichever name that is, would live on, and live on it did. So later down the road, at about 1658, a pamphlet was written, and it was called The Examination and Trial of Old Father Christmas. And this marked the earliest known reference to the words Father Christmas. And it reminds readers in this sort of post-puritanical period that if any abuse this old man, they are bad for abusing him, not he bad for being abused. So some support, finally, for Father Christmas, as he was now named. Now, the pamphlet was actually reproduced about 20 years after this, following the Restoration. And at this time, a lot of those old Christmas traditions were revived, including, of course, the personification of Christmas itself. Now, the unfortunate thing about this is that the idea had kind of lost momentum. In the 1800s, you didn't really see this widespread idea of the personification of Christmas throughout England. It was sort of known in pockets. It would turn up in sort of literature here and there, but it wasn't what we know today, and it probably wasn't what it was before the Puritans came to power. So it took a little time to get motoring again, and it was down to the theatre once again. He started to become the centrepiece of these plays, these sort of English Christmas folk plays known as mummers plays. That's what they would become in the 19th century. And the 19th century was very important for the sort of propagation of Father Christmas. And the Victorian era was a very important time for not only Father Christmas, but Christmas in general. They brought Father Christmas kind of back into the fold as this sort of, personification of the festivities. And anybody that's familiar, of course, with A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens will know that Christmas, because of that, actually was very much popularized as this event again. And, every sort of tradition that came with it was seen almost as magical. In fact, little known fact, I suppose, is that the ghost of Christmas Present in A Christmas Carol is modelled very largely on both the presence and appearance of Father Christmas, as you can see here. But at this time, and, for centuries, Father Christmas, or whatever name he'd gone by, as I said, largely sort of embodied the idea of merriment and, jollity and all of that. He was there for the good times. He was there for the adults. Father Christmas wasn't for kids. All right, until the Victorian era happened. And during the Victorian era, Christmas became more of a family-oriented endeavour, and thus Father Christmas was rolled up into this idea of gift giving. This was not something that we previously knew of in England. Now, coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, an oddly similar figure started to emerge at around that time, or at least in the 1800s, 3,000 miles away. Based on the Dutch figure Sinterklaas, Santa Claus emerged in the United States in the early 1820s. The idea of Santa Claus, popularized through a poem called A Visit from St. Nicholas, spread across the nation, the United States of America, like wildfire. It also spread to the British Isles. There are references all over the shop in the 1800s to Santa Claus in the British Isles. A reference in Scotland, for example, to Santa Claus stockings and New Year's. That's when he would turn up back in those days. Or how about the clipping from the Irish newspaper from 1853 that reads, "Tomorrow will be Christmas, what will Santa Claus bring us?" Moreover, that very same poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, did make its way into England in that very same year, and in it a distinction was made between Santa Claus in New York and Kris Kringle in Philadelphia, but that is a video for next year. The point is, Britain now had Father Christmas and Santa Claus performing essentially the same job. They were both bearded men, they both delivered gifts to children, and they were both slaughtered come Boxing Day. Nonetheless, they were still seen as two separate entities, but this began to change. See, as these sort of US-inspired customs became popular in Britain, Father Christmas began to take on a lot of the elements of Santa Claus, including the way he dressed and just some of the things that he did. Previously, Father Christmas in England hadn't been this sort of nocturnal visitor that just flew around the world at night. In fact, there's an old tale that Christmas presents used to be left under the tree by fairies. So that went away, and Santa, Father Christmas, whatever you want to call him at this point, took on that job. And by the 1880s, the US-inspired Santa Claus was firmly rooted in late Victorian British Christmas life. And around that time, Father Christmas and Santa Claus started to be used interchangeably. They started to look the same, they started to do the same things. By the beginning of the 20th century and thereafter, most kids would not have been aware that the two were once different people. I was one of those kids, until now. Now, it's a common misconception, I think, that Santa Claus's colours of red and white were heavily inspired by the Coca-Cola ads that featured in the 1930s, red and white, of course, being the colours of Coca-Cola. But those same ad campaigns did inspire the colours of Father Christmas, who before then had dressed in green or gold or many other colours that he soon dispensed with, because these Coca-Cola ads were very popular actually in Britain, and the people of Britain therefore saw what was going on in these ads and said, yes, that's Father Christmas, that's what he looks like, and he looks like that to this very day. He also looks like he's drunk too many Coca-Colas. That's it for this episode. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you all have a fabulous Christmas and that Santa/Father Christmas brings you exactly what you want tomorrow. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that my videos don't get lost in the pond. And a big shout out to all of my patrons, without who none of this would be possible, from the writing to the research to the mince pies. I'm not Santa, I promise you. If you would like to become a patron of Lost in the Pond, you can do so by going to patreon.com/lostinthepond. Anybody that does so will get access to my secret live stream, the next of which is coming in early January. And you can also, the $5 patrons or more, will get access to my podcast, my secret podcast, and more. Until next time, have a fabulous Christmas, and I'll see you on Boxing Day. No, I'll see you Christmas Day. I'm skipping one. Bye. Thank you for watching this episode of Lost in the Pond. Don't forget to hit my stupid little face to subscribe, and please share this video with the world. Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, and if you would like to support this channel, please do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond.